Everything you think you know about an EMP is probably wrong, and that gap in your understanding is exactly what will cost your family the most. The mental picture most people carry comes entirely from movies and novels. Every device dies at once. Every car stops cold on the highway. Every phone bricks permanently. The grid collapses overnight and humanity scrambles back to the 1800s. That version sells tickets. It does not match what engineers and physicists actually say would happen. The real picture is more specific, more nuanced, and honestly, more actionable. Understanding the difference is the whole game, because once you see what would actually break and what would actually survive, preparation becomes obvious. Most people are preparing for a story. You are about to prepare for reality. Here is what serious engineering research actually points to. In a genuine EMP event, whether triggered by a high-altitude nuclear detonation or a massive solar storm like the one that struck Earth in 1859, the primary damage zone is the electrical grid itself, specifically the large transformers that regulate voltage across transmission lines. These are not off-the-shelf parts. They are custom-engineered, take well over a year to manufacture, and most of them come from overseas. That supply chain problem is the real vulnerability. Recovery in the worst-hit regions could take months, in some scenarios, years. But here is what almost no fictional treatment gets right. A great many things would still work, not because the event was minor, because the physics of how electromagnetic pulses actually damage electronics is far more selective than the fictional version suggests. Devices connected to long conductors at the moment of an event carry the highest risk. Long power lines, telephone infrastructure, long antennas. These act like antennae themselves, gathering induced voltage and pushing it into whatever is connected. Devices that are disconnected, properly shielded, or physically too small to gather much induced voltage would survive most events largely intact. And then there's an entire category of things that have no electronics at all and cannot be damaged no matter what happens. The families who understand this now are the ones who will be in a completely different position if this ever becomes real. Today, we walk through 11 specific categories of things that would still work after an EMP, and for each one, the reason it survives and how to build that capability right now. Stay with this. The picture at the end looks nothing like what most preparedness content describes. Before the 11 categories, one piece of background that puts everything in context. The 1859 Carrington event is the historical anchor for solar EMP discussions. In September of that year, an enormous coronal mass ejection hit Earth. The dominant electrical infrastructure at the time was the telegraph network. Operators across 2 continents reported sparks flying from equipment, paper igniting, and lines continuing to function even after power sources were disconnected, because the induced current from the solar event was enough to drive them independently. Auroras appeared as far south as the Caribbean. It was the strongest geomagnetic storm ever recorded, and it struck a world with almost nothing vulnerable to it. If the identical event happened now, the outcome would be dramatically different, not because the storm would be bigger, because we have layered a global electrical civilization on top of a planet that has always done this kind of thing periodically. The 1989 Quebec blackout knocked out power for 6 million people for 9 hours. The cause was a solar event far smaller than Carrington. That is why this topic deserves serious, grounded attention, not the dramatic collapse fantasy, but the historically documented reality that these events happen, and one will happen again. Now to the 11 categories. 1. Older vehicles with mechanical engine controls. The image of every car freezing simultaneously on the highway does not hold up to scrutiny. The United States Air Force tested this specific question in the early 2000s. Vehicles were exposed to simulated EMP pulses at various intensities. Most kept running. Some showed temporary electronic issues that self-resolved after a restart. A small number needed repair. None experienced the total instantaneous death that fiction depicts. The most resilient vehicles in any EMP scenario are the older ones with mechanical rather than electronic engine control. A vehicle built before roughly the mid-1980s with a carburetor, a mechanical fuel pump, and points ignition has essentially nothing in its critical systems that a pulse can damage. A mid-1970s pickup truck with those systems would keep moving through almost any event. Slightly newer vehicles with early electronic fuel injection but relatively simple engine computers would also likely survive most scenarios.
The most complex modern vehicles with dozens of interconnected control units are the most exposed, though even those are far tougher than fiction implies. The practical takeaway is that transportation would not universally stop, particularly in rural areas where older vehicles remain common. Anyone wanting a specific EMP-resilient transportation option can find one without spending much. A running mid-1970s pickup in decent shape often appears for a few $1,000s, sometimes less if it needs minor work. That vehicle becomes a working option in any grid-down scenario, teaches genuinely useful mechanical skills, and unlike modern vehicles, can actually hold or gain value over time when maintained properly. The vehicles worth targeting are the simplest ones, American pickups from the 1960s through mid-1980s with carbureted engines, classic square-body Chevrolets, older Ford F-Series, early Dodge trucks. Diesel trucks from that era are particularly robust because diesel engines need even less electronic infrastructure than gasoline engines. Old tractors often have essentially zero electronic systems. Any of these requires maintenance, but the maintenance is learnable and the knowledge builds permanently. For families who cannot commit to owning a second vehicle, there is a smaller version of this same preparation with no purchase required at all, learning basic maintenance on whatever vehicle you already own, oil changes, filter replacements, tire swaps, basic diagnostics. That skill set makes you meaningfully more capable of keeping any vehicle running when professional service is not available. Even a modern vehicle damaged in an event might be repairable by someone who understands how vehicles actually function. Skills transfer in ways that specific equipment does not. 2. Motorcycles and simpler transportation. Motorcycles deserve their own entry because they offer specific advantages in this scenario that four-wheeled vehicles do not. Older motorcycles with kickstart ignition have almost no critical electronics. Even modern motorcycles are typically less electronically complex than modern cars. But the deeper value is fuel efficiency. A motorcycle getting 50 to 60 miles per gallon extends whatever fuel supply exists dramatically further than a truck getting 15. In any extended disruption where refueling infrastructure is uncertain, that efficiency gap matters enormously. A used older motorcycle is often available in running condition for $1,000 to $2,000. Basic maintenance skills are learnable from free resources. For families in rural areas with long potential travel distances or anyone wanting real fuel independence, this category is worth genuine consideration. 3. Disconnected electronics and Faraday protection. Any small electronic device that is not connected to long conductors at the moment of an event has dramatically higher survival odds. Most electromagnetic pulse damage flows through induced voltage in long wiring, power lines, cable runs, and external antennas, then travels into whatever devices are connected to them. A device connected to nothing is exposed only to the direct pulse, which is far less damaging to small electronics than the surge arriving through infrastructure wiring. This has practical implications most families overlook entirely. Phones, laptops, radios, and small devices kept in drawers with nothing plugged in are far more likely to come through an event than the same items in active use and plugged in. Backup electronics stored unplugged, a spare phone, a backup radio, extra batteries, a spare tablet, carry very high survival odds even without additional shielding. The single most important step for backup electronics is keeping them unplugged when not in use. For families wanting extra protection, a Faraday cage provides significant additional shielding. The physics is simple. A conductive enclosure that fully surrounds an object and is either grounded or isolated will block electromagnetic pulses from reaching whatever is inside. The classic implementation is a galvanized metal trash can with a tight-fitting lid, lined with cardboard so the electronics inside do not contact the metal directly. Cost is under $50. Inside goes a meaningful backup electronics reserve, a spare cell phone, a hand crank radio, two-way radios for family communication, flashlights, a small tablet, charging cables. That full setup costs well under $200 total and creates a genuine emergency electronics reserve. For deeper protection, some families layer the shielding. Wrap devices in aluminum foil first, Place them in a heavy-duty plastic bag, then put everything inside the metal container. Whether this layering is necessary depends on how seriously you weigh the scenario, but the incremental cost is minimal. The inventory to prioritize in a Faraday cage, in rough order of
Redundant communication first, spare phone, hand crank radio, two-way radios. Lighting second, LED flashlights and headlamps with batteries. Charging infrastructure third, cables, a portable power bank, a small folding solar panel and charge controller if space allows. Information fourth, thumb drives or SD cards loaded with important documents and useful reference material. Specialty electronics fifth, a spare CPAP for someone who uses one, a backup glucose meter for someone managing diabetes. One detail many guides get wrong: the container must be fully conductive and fully enclosed. Any gap or seam that is not sealed with conductive material creates an entry path. A galvanized trash can works because the lid seals against the rim with continuous metal-to-metal contact. A cardboard box lined with foil does not work as well because the seams break the conductive shield. To test your setup, place a functioning phone inside, seal it, and try calling that phone from another device. If it does not ring, the shielding is working. If it rings, there is a gap that needs attention. 4. Hand tools and mechanical equipment. Every hand tool in your garage or workshop is completely immune to any electromagnetic event. Hammers, handsaws, screwdrivers, wrenches, chisels, pliers, files, hand-cranked drills. All of them operate on mechanical advantage alone. No electronics, no vulnerable components. They worked a century ago, they will work a century from now regardless of what happens to infrastructure. The practical implications are significant. The ability to do real work with your hands, fix broken items, build necessary things, maintain a home, repair vehicles, construct basic shelter, does not depend on electricity. It depends on tools and the skill to use them. In any extended disruption, households with real tool capability are in a categorically different position than households without. They can maintain their own situation, they can help neighbors, they can solve the small problems that accumulate during any hard stretch. A solid basic toolkit covering carpentry, basic metalwork, and basic plumbing runs $300 to $500 for quality tools that will last generations. But owning tools you do not know how to use is not the same as being capable. Spending a few weekends learning basic carpentry or vehicle repair or home maintenance is time that compounds permanently. Start with one skill you want to develop. Watch tutorials. Practice on small, real projects. The competence builds gradually, and it never goes away. There is a historical pattern worth noting. For most of American history, basic household self-sufficiency and maintenance was normal. Parents taught children basic woodworking, basic mechanics, basic repair as a matter of course. That transmission has largely broken down in the last 2 generations. Most modern households cannot repair what they own and compensate by paying for replacement or professional service. That works fine in normal times. It works poorly when professional services are unavailable and replacements cannot be shipped. Rebuilding some of that lost capability is one of the highest return preparations available. Take a basic woodworking class, learn auto maintenance from tutorials and by working on your own vehicle. Handle basic home repairs yourself instead of immediately calling a professional. Within a year of this, your household changes from dependent to genuinely capable. 5. Manual kitchen equipment. Every non-electric food preparation method that was standard in earlier American kitchens is completely immune to any electromagnetic event. A manual can opener, a hand crank grain mill for grinding whole wheat into fresh flour, a French press for coffee, a mortar and pestle, a cast iron pan that functions over any heat source from a wood fire to a camp stove to a working gas range, a stovetop percolator, cutting boards and knives. All of it works indefinitely with no electricity and no exposure to any disruption. The value here goes beyond the tools themselves. A pantry of dried beans, whole grains, and flour can become real meals using only hand tools, a heat source, and cooking skill. That combination is the ultimate resilience because it needs no infrastructure beyond what a household can sustain internally. The specific items worth acquiring are affordable. A manual can opener costs a few dollars. Buy two. A quality cast iron pan runs $30 to $50 and lasts for generations. A hand crank grain mill is around $80 for a basic model and converts whole wheat berries into fresh flour in about 10 minutes per pound. A stovetop percolator or French press is $20 to $40. A basic mortar and pestle is under $15. Add the skills to use them by cooking with these tools regularly in normal times, and you have a food preparation capability that is genuinely.
The additional benefit is that most of these tools produce food that simply tastes better. Freshly ground flour has a different quality than bagged flour. Coffee from a percolator or French press has a character that drip machines do not produce. Food cooked in cast iron develops flavors that nonstick pans cannot. These are not just insurance against a scenario that may never come. They are genuine upgrades to your normal kitchen that happen to also be immune to anything an electromagnetic event could do. Preparations that are useful in normal times are always more valuable than ones that sit in a closet waiting. 6. Wood-burning heat and cooking capability. Any heating or cooking method that does not depend on electricity is a serious asset in any extended grid disruption. Wood stoves, functional fireplaces, and outdoor fire setups all provide heat and cooking capacity from a fuel source that grows in the woods, needs no supply chain, and stores essentially forever once properly seasoned. The practical value is enormous. In a winter grid disruption of any kind, households with wood-burning heat are in a completely different situation than those without. They stay warm, they can cook and heat water. Their homes remain habitable indefinitely as long as fuel is available. The 2021 Texas freeze killed hundreds of people. Most of those deaths happened in homes that lost heat and had no backup. Wood-burning capability is the most powerful winter grid independence preparation available to any household, and would matter most in any EMP scenario extending into cold months. Installing a wood stove is a significant expense, typically $2,000 to $5,000 for the stove plus installation, but the payback over decades is real. It reduces normal heating costs. It provides emergency cooking capacity. It provides genuine heat independence for the life of the home. For families who cannot install a permanent solution, portable options provide meaningful capability at a fraction of the cost. A small camping wood stove costs $50 to $100. A rocket stove runs around $100. A quality fire pit is $100 to $300. Any wood-burning capability is dramatically better than none. Fuel is the easy part. Fallen wood is available almost anywhere. Purchased firewood is available locally. Pallet wood comes from any commercial area. The equipment is what most families lack. The skills involved are learnable and historically normal. Starting a fire reliably, banking coals overnight so morning fire starting is easy, properly drying wood for efficient burning, maintaining a stove or fireplace safely. Every American household for the entire history of this country up through roughly the mid-20th century depended on some form of wood burning for heat and cooking. This knowledge faded because central heating and modern kitchens replaced the need. It has not disappeared. Books on traditional home management cover it thoroughly. Online resources cover it even more easily. This is not exotic knowledge being introduced from scratch. It is a return to something that was completely ordinary. 7. Solar equipment that was disconnected during the event. This one surprises people because solar involves electronics, but the specific setup of solar systems gives them a meaningful survival advantage in an EMP scenario. Solar panels themselves are largely silicone wafers with metal contacts. The panels alone, disconnected from external wiring, have very little to damage. The vulnerable parts are the charge controllers, inverters, and connected battery systems, the electronics that regulate power flow from panels to storage to end use. If those components are connected to the grid or to long wire runs at the moment of an event, they are at risk. If they are stored in a Faraday cage or simply disconnected, the solar capability survives intact. A family with a portable solar setup, folding panels, a portable power station, cables, and a small charge controller can store the electronics in Faraday protection during normal times, deploy panels when needed, and have functional solar power in a scenario where most households have none. Some families keep a complete backup set of solar components in Faraday storage so that even if the primary system is damaged, a full replacement is ready to deploy. The setup worth starting with is affordable.
A basic folding solar panel runs $50 to $100. A portable power station in the 500 watt-hour range costs $300 to $500 and can run phones, lights, radios, and small devices for extended periods. A larger system in the 1,000 to 2,000 watt-hour range handles a wider range of devices and runs $600 to $1,000. Combined with panels and stored with protection, these systems provide indefinite off-grid electricity. Store the electronics protected, deploy when. That is functional power in a scenario where most households are completely dark. 8. Bicycles. The most overlooked transportation category in all of preparedness culture. A bicycle has no electronics of any kind. It is immune to any electromagnetic event, any grid failure, any infrastructure disruption. It requires no fuel beyond the calories of its rider. It moves 3 to 5 times faster than walking for the same energy expenditure, and carries useful cargo with a basket, saddlebags, or a small trailer attached. In extended scenarios where fuel becomes scarce or roads are congested, bicycles become dramatically more valuable than their everyday role suggests. During Hurricane Katrina, during the fuel shortages of the 1970s, during various historical disruptions, bicycles consistently proved to be among the most functional transportation options when other systems failed. A good mountain bike or hybrid suitable for rough conditions runs $300 to $500 new and significantly less used. A cargo trailer that converts a bike into a small hauling vehicle costs around $150. Basic maintenance, changing tires, adjusting chains, fixing flats, takes a few hours to learn and needs almost no specialized tools. And unlike stored gasoline, which degrades in months, a bicycle stored in a dry space lasts essentially indefinitely with occasional attention. For families, having one bicycle per person is a genuine capability held in reserve. Kids grow into larger bikes over time. Adults benefit from the exercise and the option it represents. In any scenario where other transportation becomes unavailable, the bicycles in the garage suddenly become the most valuable assets there. That option is worth having, even if it never needs to be used. 9. Printed books and physical information. This is the category most people forget entirely, and it may be among the most important. Every book in your home, every printed reference, every recipe card, every set of instructions, all of it survives any electromagnetic event completely intact. Paper and ink are immune to pulses. The information they carry requires no infrastructure to access. Modern life has moved enormous amounts of information storage to digital form. Most households would be genuinely limited by loss of internet access, let alone loss of all electronics. Medical guides, recipes, technical manuals, and general references that are instantly searchable online become completely inaccessible without power. A modest home reference collection provides continuity of knowledge that no electronic system can guarantee. The specific books worth having in physical form: a comprehensive home medical reference, the standard first aid manual from a recognized health organization, a volume covering medical care when professional help is delayed or unavailable, a cookbook that assumes scratch cooking from raw ingredients. Many classic mid-century American cookbooks fit this description well. A home repair reference, a book on gardening or food preservation for longer-term food independence, a general reference volume, an almanac or similar for the wide range of miscellaneous questions that arise in any extended scenario. Beyond books, physical copies of important documents matter for practical reasons. Insurance records, medical records, family documents, and photographs stored in a fireproof safe provide continuity of identity and history that digital systems cannot guarantee. Total cost for a serious home reference collection and physical record backup is under $200. The information is accessible forever regardless of what happens to any electronic system. 10. Cash and physical value stores. In any scenario where financial infrastructure is disrupted, and an EMP scenario would almost certainly disrupt banking systems, card processing, and ATMs for at least some period, physical cash and other tangible value stores become dramatically more useful than they appear in ordinary times. Every household should maintain meaningful reserves of both. The cash reserve is straightforward, several hundred to a few $1,000s in small denominations, 20s, 10s, 5s, and singles stored securely at home. This provides a working payment method for any business still operating during an extended disruption. Small bills specifically matter because businesses during any disruption often cannot make change or verify large bills easily. A $50 or $100 bill at a gas station running on emergency power may be refused or accepted for only a partial purchase. A supply of smaller bills lets you pay for exactly what you need in a way that businesses can actually process. For deeper value storage, some households maintain reserves in physical precious metals: gold coins, silver rounds, pre-1965 U.S. quarters and dimes. This is a personal financial decision that warrants careful research before any action.
But as a physical store of value that does not depend on any financial infrastructure to remain accessible, precious metals carry thousands of years of historical precedent. If this category interests you, research carefully, buy from reputable sources, and store securely at home rather than in bank boxes that may not be accessible during a disruption. The broader principle is that any store of value depending entirely on functioning digital infrastructure is vulnerable in the specific moment you would most want to draw on it. Maintaining some fraction of household reserves in physical form costs nothing in normal times and matters significantly if the digital layer becomes temporarily unavailable. 11. Your neighbors and your community. The final category is the most important one, and it is one no purchase can replace. Your neighbors are not affected by electromagnetic events. They remain fully capable, fully present, and fully able to solve problems together regardless of what happens to any infrastructure. The historical evidence on this point is overwhelming and consistent. Every documented long-term disruption of the modern era, the Depression, wartime rationing, modern regional infrastructure failures, points the same direction. Community networks are what carry households through extended difficulty. The neighbor with a productive garden, the family with the wood stove everyone can gather around, the person with real repair skills, the elderly resident with knowledge from before the grid was reliable, the households that share resources, exchange information, and check on one another. These informal networks have always been what actually carries communities through hard times. They would carry communities through an EMP scenario too. The framing in much of preparedness culture that neighbors are threats in a grid-down scenario is precisely backwards. In the situations that actually happen, the well-connected household with modest supplies consistently outperforms the isolated household with enormous stockpiles. Networks carry redundancy that no individual can replicate. Networks hold skills that no single family can hold. Networks provide emotional and logistical support that no individual can sustain alone. And networks hold vastly more problem-solving capacity than any single household, regardless of how well prepared. In a scenario where the grid is down for months, no single family holds all the skills and resources needed to handle the full range of problems that arise. Medical emergencies, equipment failures, food shortages, security concerns, elderly neighbors who need support, children who need care. A well-connected neighborhood collectively holds the skills and resources to address these problems distributed across many households. An isolated family cannot come close regardless of gear. There is a specific study worth knowing because it reshapes how many people think about preparedness entirely. The sociologist Eric Klinenberg examined the 1995 Chicago heat wave, which killed over 700 people in 5 days. He compared two adjacent neighborhoods with nearly identical demographics, similar age distribution, similar income, similar housing. One had a dramatically higher death rate than the other. The difference was social. The neighborhood with fewer deaths had more sidewalks where neighbors encountered each other, more relationships among residents, more reasons for people to be outside checking on one another. Social infrastructure, the simple human network of people watching out for each other, was as protective as any technology or physical resource. That finding applies directly to any extended crisis scenario, including this one. A functioning neighborhood collectively holds skills, resources, information, and problem-solving capacity that no individual household can match. The elderly neighbor who remembers how things worked before everything was electrified, the person with medical training, the family with a garden that produces more than they need, the individual who can fix small engines, the someone who simply knows the local area deeply from years of living there. None of these are things any single household can fully hold. All of them are distributed across a functioning neighborhood. The ways to build this network in normal times are simple and cost almost nothing. Introduce yourself to your immediate neighbors if you have not already done so, exchange contact information for actual emergencies, keep an eye on each other's homes when families are away, show up when a neighbor needs a hand, attend whatever small community gatherings your area produces, block events, holiday gatherings, neighborhood meetups. These small investments compound into real collective capacity over years. Every hour spent building actual relationships with the people around you is worth more in any extended disruption than an equivalent hour spent buying equipment